Hi, creative friends. Thank you so much for being here. This is going to be a video about archetypes. I'm going to try to simplify the whole concept of archetypes. And this is going to come under the what I have learned from Dr. Clarissa Pinkola Estes. Now, in this video, I'm going to bring in Jung and his teachings and a few other teachings of archetypes that I have relied on. But first, I just want to thank you so much for being here. Now, this series is not going to be for everybody. If it is for you, I welcome you and I thank you so much for holding space for me. I hope that I can teach you some of what I have learned through the years from Dr. Clarissa Pinkola Estes. And if it's not for you, then I let you go in peace. And maybe at some point in the future, a year from now, 5 years from now, maybe you'll come back to this and maybe it will be for you. But I am going to make this series as a very casual kind of, we are sitting over a cup of tea and just having a chat. Normally, for all of my videos, I put a lot of time and effort and preparation into it. And even though I leave all my mistakes in and I want to allow myself the space and the freedom to make mistakes and to show those mistakes and to show up as I am in my art making. I still put a lot of time in preparation. I journal about it, I think about it, I write about it, and then I make my videos. And that's for all of my art videos. But for this series, I am simply going to speak from the heart. I'm going to not edit anything. I'm going to leave things as they are. I am going to show up as I am, and I invite you to show up as you are as well. And I think that that's where the gold is. That's where all the juiciness and the wisdom and the creativity and the lessons learned, that's where all of those teachings and wisdom lies, in those spaces of just showing up as we are. So before I proceed, I just wanted to address a comment that I received on my last video about Dr. Estes. And I so appreciate all your comments, all your concerns, all your insights and feedback, etc. The comment was stating that illiteracy is not a negative, and to view it as such is a very myopic view. And I completely agree with that. So what I'm thinking is that maybe in my last video on Dr. Estes, when I was talking about her being raised in an illiterate environment, I was not saying that that is my personal view and understanding of what is literate or illiterate. I was speaking about the society that we live in, the culture that we have to operate in, which is Western society, which is the culture and education system that Dr. Estes was in. And it was very difficult for her because she was raised in an environment that was illiterate. And by that definition, I mean people who are unable to read and write. That is a definition of being illiterate in Western society. And so she was raised in that system. She had to go to school, and they labeled her as a slow learner, or she had a learning difficulty or disability or whatever. So it was very difficult for her to operate in that system until she turned it into gold. So to the viewer who left that comment, I was not saying that I personally hold those beliefs, but I was pointing out that we live in a culture that does hold those beliefs. Um, so what I'm thinking is that I will confess that I am better at expressing myself in writing. I tend to be an introvert, and so there is going to be a steep learning curve for me to express myself verbally. And so maybe I didn't articulate myself well enough. So I ask that you be patient with me as I learn, as I go along, making this series of videos, because like I said, I do have a tendency to be able to express myself much better writing. So if I gave the impression that that was my view. That is not true at all. So, anyways, let's move on to this part of the video. Okay, so I'm going to talk about archetypes. Now, this book over here is, Dr. Clarissa Pinkola Estes is a senior Jungian psychologist, analyst, etc. So her work is based on Carl Jung. And if you are familiar with Jung, he had the he created a whole body of work about archetypes. And so basically, archetypes are part of the human collective unconscious that supersedes, that overrides any kind of cultural, familial, societal belief systems and thought processes, etc. So while they do tie in and they do all fit in like a puzzle, there are layers to them. So what I mean by that is, regardless of society, so you can have somebody that comes from, say, Italy, and then you can have somebody that comes from, say, India, and both of those people, when I talk about the mother archetype, there's going to be a universal component to the mother archetype. So I can say something like, I met this lady yesterday, and she was such a mother to me. I was so blessed and happy, blah blah blah. And so basically, I don't have to explain that any further, because somebody from Italy and somebody from India, they're going to both understand what that means on an intuitive level. They're going to be like, oh, it means that, she took me into her fold. She gave me a hug. She fed me some soup. She listened to me. She cared for me. She doted over me. So that is the universal archetype. So we all plug into that. But now, on another level, we also have our own societal archetypes about that. So somebody from India might have different beliefs about a mother than somebody from, say, India or Canada. Um, so that's another layer of an archetype. And then you get another layer of an archetype, which is the negative attributes of an archetype and the positive attributes of an archetype. So Jung came up with the concept of archetypes. And if I can explain an archetype the way I understand it, an archetype is a belief system, but it's also so much more than that. And it embodies all these energies that are at once universal, but also personal, because we bring our experiences to that archetype. So there are, like I said, there are many levels to it. Now, I am going to show you these archetype cards over here. They are by Carolyn Mace, and I absolutely love her work. Um, and I should say Dr. Carolyn Mace. So when I first came upon her work when I was about 25, I had no idea what on earth she was talking about. It was as if she was speaking in Mandarin or Cantonese. Like, I listened to her work, I tried to read her work, but I really couldn't understand any of it. And then, strangely enough, 10 years later, I was about 35, and I came across her work again. And now I understood everything that she was saying. Like, it resonated with me on a really deep level. And that's because I had grown, I had transformed, I had changed. So I was able to meet her where she was at. Whereas when I was in my 20s, I had not developed enough to be able to meet her in that space. So these cards are brilliant, I have to tell you. There's about 72 archetypes that she covers. And there's also a little book here that explains the archetypes in depth. And I'm just going to cover like 3 of these cards over here. But there are 74, like I said, and she also has 6 blank cards that you can fill in for yourself. So you can make them very, very personal. Now, there are some archetypes that everybody has. The one that comes to mind is the child archetype. Every single human being on earth has a child archetype, because we were all children first. But not everybody, say for instance, has the artist archetype. So if somebody does not have an archetype, like just say, um, you know, somebody does not have an artist archetype, then no matter what they do, they cannot access that energy. Uh, that's the way I understand it, anyways. So I'm just gonna pick out three cards here, and I'm gonna just read it because this is the simplest and most accessible way that I know that I can access the information about archetypes. Now, I have written, sorry, not written, I have read a lot of what Jung has written about archetypes, and a lot of it is just really, really difficult for me to understand. Um, I have sat there with a dictionary in one hand and his work in another hand, and I have tried to make notes. I've tried to really understand it. And I mean, his work is very complex. I mean, people write dissertations on Jung. So it is a large, complex body of work. But, it was just very difficult for me to understand. So I'm going to try to explain it the way I understand it and the way Carolyn Mace so brilliantly explains it in a very simplified way. So I'll take the artist archetype, for instance. So the light attributes are empowering a dimension of life that is just beyond the five senses, inspiring others to see life symbolically. Now, the shadow attributes are using talent as an excuse to mistreat others, posing as the starving artist to elicit pity. So, this is the card right there. And basically, what an archetype is it's neither negative nor positive. It is a, it just is. It's, it's neutral, but that archetype is going to have light aspects and dark aspects. And the whole work of meeting our shadow selves and coming face to face with our hidden parts is so that we can transform the shadow aspects into the light aspects. So the second one I'm going to talk about is child. Now, Carolyn Mace breaks down child into like 6 or 7 different archetypes because there's, say, the wounded child, the mystical child, etc. This one is the eternal child. And the light attributes are determination to remain young in body, mind, and spirit, ability to see things with fresh eyes. So the thing that comes to mind is when I do my art videos and I talk about beginner's mind, that would be the light attribute of the eternal child. That is where you are in a state of playfulness and curiosity, and you're in a childlike state of mind, not a childish state of mind, which is immature, but a childlike, which has, wonder and play and joy and just being in a state of, wow, I'm just going to see what happens. Now, the shadow attributes of the child is of the eternal child is the inability to grow up and be responsible, to extreme dependency on others for physical security. So, what comes to mind for me in the shadow attribute is, say, a Peter Pan syndrome, somebody who just doesn't want to grow up. And so they have hooked on to the child archetype in its shadow aspect. Now, this is a great example of how archetypes are neutral. They are neither positive nor negative. They just are. So this is the prostitute archetype. Now, our we might think, oh, prostitute, that must mean negative. But no, in an archetypal symbolic sense, it does not. It has light attributes and dark attributes. So the light attribute would be accentuates the challenge of surviving without negotiating the power of your spirit. Okay, so what comes to mind to me is, I'll use this in an artistic sense. So just say somebody comes up to me and they, offer me money to do something that goes against my principles. Like they say, oh, I'm going to pay you $5,000, but you have to put out something negative into the world. Like it's going to hurt people, or it's going to cause negativity in the world. And if I was in my light attribute of the prostitute archetype, I wouldn't even have to think about that. It doesn't align with who I am. So I would just simply say no. But if I was in my shadow attribute, which is places material considerations and security above self empowerment, so if I was in the shadow attribute of the prostitute archetype, I would say, you know what, I know it's not good. I know I'm putting negativity out in the world, but it's $5,000 and I really need the money. And I would make excuses about it, and then I would go ahead and do it. So I hope this is illustrating how archetypes are neither negative nor positive. They are neutral energies that tie into our belief systems, and they have either light attributes or shadow attributes. And if you want me to talk more about these cards, I can certainly do that either by incorporating them into further videos, like little by little, or I can do a whole entire video just talking about these cards in depth. But I think that might require a whole other series, because it is a complex and complicated um, kind of psychology. So just let me know in the comments, if you're interested in this. But this is the nuts and bolts of Jungian psychology in its most simplified way. Although it's not simple, this is the easiest way that I have been able to grasp it. And this is also the nuts and bolts of Dr. Clarissa Pinkola Estes's work, whether it's this book or her audiobooks. So I'm just going to put this away for now. But one of the things I have found helpful when I'm doing shadow work, and I have been doing shadow work for, I want to say, about 10 years, when I made a conscious effort to really get down into the nuts and bolts of me facing my shadow. One of the things that I have found to be most helpful, even though it might seem counterintuitive, is to be in a space of non judgment. And what I mean by that is to not judge myself, to not judge my past, to not judge the people who have hurt me, who have abused me, who have downloaded me with beliefs that are not for my highest good, that don't serve me or my life or my life's work or my purpose or my present, or because when I first started, it was very easy for me to fall into the trap of victimhood and blame. But what I have found over the years is the more I operate in a space of being neutral and not judging, but to simply look at things in a subjective a manner as possible, and to look at what I have been through as lessons that happened for me, not to me. And I hope I'm making sense in what I'm saying. So, what I am going to now briefly talk about is Dr. Clarissa Pinkola Estes, when she talks about the archetypes. So basically, this book is a compilation of fairy tales, stories, folklore, and she has used that as a vehicle to talk about archetypes and Jungian psychology. So when she talks about, say, an aspect of the feminine psyche, she will put it in a fairy tale, and then she will kind of like mine that fairy tale for all of its gold. So I hope I'm making sense. So before her chapters, she talks about the wild woman. What is the wild woman? And the wild woman archetype has been lost because, in present day society, we have all these belief systems tied into a wild woman. Now, different cultures are going to have different kind of ideas about what a wild woman is, the negative connotations, etc., etc. But in an archetypal sense, the wild woman archetype, which held so much wisdom, so much power, so much intuition, you can see them present day in, say, I'm Hindu. So you can see them in aspects of Hinduism, say in Kali or Durga or Shakti. Those are very female empowered, like in full divine feminine power that encapsulates everything. It's not the virgin whore dichotomy that you see in present day Western society, but it's more of a, I can embody the wild, the powerful, I can embody the sublime, the creative part of it, the I can be all encompassing. I can be a full human being. But of course, culture has compartmentalized the psyche of women. And so when Dr. Clarissa Pinkola Estes, when she talks about the wild woman archetype, she is trying to retrieve those aspects that we have lost. And like I said, when I was doing this series, I was going to talk about, something in the book and then how I personally use that in my own life. So when I was about 12 or 13, I had not come across this book. I had no language for archetypes or Jung or, I mean, none of that. So we had just immigrated to Canada when I was 12. So I was about 13 ish. And I started grasping um, the very real and raw fact that the beliefs of the people that were, surrounding me, my family, my extended family, my community, my culture, etc., I came to the understanding slowly when I was about 13, so I was quite young, that these beliefs were not serving me. I remember like just thinking these beliefs of misogyny, of uh, imprisoning of women's minds, of restriction, of not just patriarchy, but poisonous patriarchy to the extreme, because in Indian culture, patriarchy is taken to the extreme. Whether it's talked about or not, that is a reality of the situation. Um, so I came to the belief very early on that these beliefs were not serving me. And that's why when I talked about the first video, I was looking for mentors. I was so, my psyche was so parched and abused and starving for some grasp of a belief system that would serve me, that would help me, that would empower me. And I saw none of that. What I saw and experienced was abuse, was toxicity, was patriarchy to the extreme, was control. It was a psychology of might is right, of whatever the man, the male, the adults say, um, says goes. It didn't have to make sense. They didn't have to explain anything to anyone. There was no sense of accountability. There was no sense of honesty. So I came to an understanding very early on that my belief system was not serving me. Now, it would take me, I don't know how many years and decades to now tackle that belief system. And it's an ongoing process that I am still doing. I will never stop doing this work. This is my life's work. So I hope that I have explained in this video how archetypes are tied into our belief systems, how if we don't know what those belief systems are, if we take those belief systems to be true, we are going to be operating on an unconscious level. So what I mean by that is just imagine that, I'm a computer and I get downloaded by all this faulty programming. So I only speak English and I'm downloaded with a computer program that's running in another language. And I don't understand it because I only speak and understand English, but somebody downloaded me with this faulty programming. Um, and so now I'm like running off a program that is not really serving me. I may learn ways um, that, that I can survive in that programming, that faulty programming, but it's not my natural language. It's not where I can thrive and grow and bloom. It's always going to feel like I'm on edge. I'm stunted. I can't really be me. And that's what happens when we have these faulty programs. We cannot be authentic to who we are. So when I was downloaded with all these survival programs and all these belief systems that are not true and they don't serve me in any capacity, they serve the people and the systems who installed those programs into me. They don't serve me. So when I can understand that and realize that and and look at it in a very subjective, non judgmental way, that's where I can make the changes. So I know that was a lot and it's really a heavy topic. I've tried to make it as simple as possible. Thank you so much for holding space for me and for watching this video. And I so appreciate your comments and all your insights and feedback. It means the world to me. So thank you so much for being here, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.